Happy Easter, everybody! You are watching the J-Red Show on YouTube and TikTok. The Buffalo Sabres playoff drought is finally over. After 15 years, the Sabres have finally clinched a playoff spot when the New York Rangers defeated the Detroit Red Wings 4-1. So it wasn't as exciting as the Andy Dalton pass when that ended the Bills drought. But whatever. Sabres fans are now happy that they no longer have the longest playoff drought in the Big Four major pro sports. And now it's up to the New York Jets, who are all alone in their fertility. So, with that out of the way, I'm going to go talk on this show. I'm going to talk about the highlights and the lowlights of the drought. Obviously, there's a lot more lowlights than highlights, but there were some highlights. The Sabres won over 400 games in the drought. And they made Sabres fans happy, except for the 1 year when Sabres fans wanted them to lose. But by the way, Jack Eichel, getting Jack Eichel is not going to make the list. At the time, Sabres fans were happy to finish last place and get Jack Eichel, or Connor McDavid. They ended up with Jack Eichel. But of course, that did not work out. And in fact, that could be a low light. But the highlights of the drought, no, there's a couple of good ones, like the butt goal against the Coyotes. They had some nice winning streaks during the drought. But in my opinion, the top five highlights, the top five best moments of the playoff drought. Number one, winning the draft lottery in 2018 and getting Rasmus Dahlin. The Sabres drafted the best defenseman they have ever had. Number two, RJ night, when the Buffalo Sabres defeated the Nashville Predators 4-3, and they honored Rick Jeanneret 1 month before his retirement. And of course, number three, Rick Jeanneret's final game, when the Buffalo Sabres defeated the Chicago Blackhawks 3-2 on a Casey Middlestat overtime goal. Rick Jeanneret says Casey at the bat, Buffalo wins in overtime. And we saw it, and the Sabres just released an emotional video about Rick Jeanneret talking about this team, this city. It's really a tearjerker. I mean, as happy as I am that the Sabres are back in the playoffs, it's a little bittersweet that Rick Jeanneret's not going to be there. I like Dan Dunleavy, don't get me wrong, but he could never top Rick Jeanneret. And of course, number five, I think is pretty easy. December 9th, when the Buffalo Sabres fired Kevin Adams and hired Jarmo Kekalainen. And then yesterday, when they finally broke the drought. And now for the lowlights. And there's a lot to choose from. Darcy Regier saying the team has to go through some suffering. Not getting not losing the 2015 draft lottery. Getting Jack Eichel instead of Connor McDavid. The failure of Dan Bylsma. The failure of Phil Housley. Pat LaFontaine leaving. I mean, that whole debacle. Ralph Kruger. Dwayne's rant, how he was complaining about the Chinese knockoff jerseys and the misspellings. But if we were talking about the all-time lowest moment of the drought, I think it's pretty easy. The all-time lowest moment of the drought, but probably along with the John Reyes debacle and the bankruptcy and that scandal in 2003, probably the lowest moment in the history of the franchise. COVID. When COVID hit, disrupted the season. Terry Campagula gutted the scouting department, fired Botterill, fired everybody, hired Kevin Adams. The 3E policy of effective, efficient, and economic, meaning they weren't going to spend the cap. And when they returned to the ice in front of no fans, they lose 18 games in a row. Yeah, it's a winless streak because the NHL counts point loser and overtime and shootout points as not a losing streak, but fuck it, I'm gonna call it a losing streak. 18 losses in a row. The next year they got a little bit better. They gave Rick Jenner a good farewell. The year after that, they were 1 point away. Then 2024, 2025, very disappointing year. They fired Don Granato. And then the second, brought back Lindy Ruff. And then the second lowest moment of the drought, they had a 13-game losing streak. And that had the infamous press conference where Kevin Adams said, no one wants to come here because we have high taxes and no palm trees. What an embarrassment. That's the third lowest moment of the history of the franchise. Fortunately, when you hit rock bottom, the only place to go is up. I mean, there's a lot of low points. When we compare this to the Bills' drought, like, what were the highlights and the lowlights of their drought? Highlights is probably when they beat Tom Brady twice. The opener in 2003 and then 2011. Although you can argue that 2003 doesn't belong on the list because we didn't know that Tom Brady was going to be the best of all time at the time, even though he won a Super Bowl. 2011 is definitely easily the highlight of the Bills' drought. Lowlights, I mean, again, like the Sabres drought, there's a lot of lowlights. But it's hard to think of a moment as bad as the COVID 18-game losing streak and the 13-game losing streak. Maybe 9/11 because they went 3-13 that year. And then they had a big national tragedy that shut down sports. I mean, obviously 9/11 and COVID suck because not just because it closed sports, but because of the loss of lives, obviously. But that's just me. But I still consider them low points in the history of the Bills and the low points in the history of the Sabres. If I had to pick one, I'd say maybe when Ralph Wilson said enjoy the Bills while you can, that it got real scary in the late 2000s when the Bills were pretty close to leaving, the Bon Jovi scenario. But fortunately, it worked out. The highlights of the drought was being Tom Brady, when Terry Kim Pagula bought the team and saved them from leaving, then firing Rex Ryan and hiring Sean McDermott. Oh, and Rex Ryan eating dog biscuits could be also a low point. So, those are the highlights and the lowlights of the playoff droughts. Sabres are in a bit of a slump right now, winning only 2 of their last 7 games. A lot of fans panicking, thinking that they could be going one and done. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but remember, the 2005-2006 Sabres went 2 and had a stretch of 7-1 before their playoffs. So here's hoping the Sabres will turn it around. So what are your thoughts? What are your highlights and lowlights of the playoff drought? Hit me on Twitter at JRedShow and on Threads and Blue Sky. And I will see you later.